And the storms are gonna get worse, there's no doubt
Oh,
about
yeah.
it.
Already getting worse.
This guy has to go.
I think he's learning. He's coming along. I would vote here, 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 and Maureen. There's one more.
Testing, testing.
Okay. In compliance with the Open Publics Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. Seeing none, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mrs. Hutchinson? Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mrs. Werner?
Here.
Ms. Hessel? Here. Mr. Ledwin?
Here.
Mrs. Notch?
Here.
Mr. Walsh? Mrs. McDade? Mr. Venuto?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the minutes from August 25th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Motion by Mr. Ledwin, seconded by Mrs. Notch. Mrs. Werner?
Abstain?
Ms. Hessel?
Yes.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mrs. Hutchinson? Thank you.
Our first resolution tonight is Cape May Sea Glass Properties LLC at 933 Beach Avenue. Can we have a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Mrs. Werner, seconded by Ms. Hessel. Mrs. Notch?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Ms. Hessel?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Abstain?
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mrs. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the second resolution is Cape CJ LLC at 1301 Beach Avenue. Can we have a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Murray, seconded by Mrs. Hessel. I'm sorry, Mrs. Werner. Mrs. Werner?
Abstain?
Ms. Hessel?
Yes.
Mr. Ledwin?
Abstain.
Mrs. Notch?
Abstain?
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mrs. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the first application, Connor and Alex McMahon at 22nd Avenue, has been postponed to November 17th.
That matter will be heard on November 17th. There will not be another notice. This is your notice if you wish to appear or be heard on that application. You just show up on that date at the same time in this location, and you will be heard, but there will be no further notice. Thank you.
Okay, our application tonight then is Yacht Avenue Marina at 1505 Yacht Avenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, everyone. Andrew Catanese on behalf of the applicant, Yacht Harbor Marine LLC, and its principal member, Mr. William Klinger, who is here to my left. Also with us is our project architect, John Halbrunner, and our project engineer, Brian Murphy. The subject property is located at 1505 Yacht Avenue. It is an irregularly shaped, 10-sided waterfront corner lot, which is a mouthful. It's got a lot going on in terms of the shape and design of the existing lot. Historically, it was operated as a marina, Currently, that marina remains on the site, as well as a historic single-family home, which is, of course, proposed to remain. This evening, we're requesting preliminary and final site plan approval with variances to permit the construction of 7 additional dwelling units in 2 buildings. Those are attached dwelling unit buildings, to bring the total number of units on site to 8, as well as reconstruction of the marina. Historically, it had 17 units. That will go to 20, should the board see fit to approve it. We're also requesting several variances. First, to permit 2 uses on the site. Technically, we already have a marina and a residential use, so it's an existing non-conforming condition, but of course, that would expand with the addition of the additional units. Second, variance to permit attached dwelling units, because although the zone does permit residential, it doesn't permit them as attached dwellings with 3 or more, basically townhouse-style units in a single building. Effectively, that will cluster those away from the roads, and we'll explain why we think that's a good design choice for this site. There are several bulk variances for existing conditions, as well as a few for proposed conditions, but I'll leave those to the experts to address, so you don't have to hear it twice. With that, if we could swear our witnesses. We don't anticipate providing testimony from Mr. Clear, though we're welcome to swear him in just in case there's something he can assist with, and then we'll get started.
Okay, also swear in our board engineer. To each of the 4 of you, sir.
Say it again.
Yeah. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I do.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Catanese.
Thank you. Mr. Halbrunner, if we could start with you first. We offer him as an expert in engineering, architecture, and planning. I think he's been before the board before. Certainly happy to address credentials if necessary.
Yeah, I think it's been some times I've been before the zoning board here in
Got it.
Cape May, so.
Yeah.
Talk into your microphone, please.
Sorry. Is this better? Okay, it's been some times I've been before the zoning board, so allow me. Registered in New Jersey as both an engineer and an architect. You hear me okay? Is this better? Okay, try this. Okay. I'm licensed in New Jersey as both an engineer and an architect. I've been practicing for, more than 30 years in the area, in both fields. I'm a 1991 graduate from Drexel University with a bachelor's degree in architectural engineering, hence I practiced both fields. I've been before this board, but it's been a number of years, and I routinely provide testimony on applications virtually in every planning or zoning board in Atlantic and Cape May County at some point during my career.
Are you a planner as well?
I'm not licensed as a planner.
Okay.
We offer him as an expert in all 3 due to all 3 disciplines due to his other licenses, which permit him to offer planning testimony.
Just wanted to,
Yes.
Correct. I do not hold the planning license. I am authorized to provide the planning testimony, though.
thanks, sir.
All set.
Are we good? Okay.
Trying to get the lights turned on.
Yeah, good idea. Right. I was going blind.
I'm like,
Get
it's
started.
been a long day. My eyes are a little tired.
Thank you.
This is the way it was. Finally got these on. And we can accept Mr. Murphy.
There's one.
Got one on.
Well, one, Karen.
Thank you.
Oh, look at this.
Much better.
Woo!
Now we look like we're being interrogated.
I don't know if I even need these anymore. All right. And would you like to hear from Mr. Murphy, or they're both qualified at this point?
He's been here several times. We accept Mr. Murphy.
Very
Thank you
well.
very much.
Thank you. John, why don't I let you just go over your plans? I think that's the easiest.
Okay.
Design.
I have 2 new exhibits behind me that were not submitted as part of the application. You want to mark those as an evidence now? I've got copies for the board secretary.
A2?
Works for me.
Please leave the exhibits with me before you go tonight. Thank you. So you have A1 and A2?
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
We brought you small copies as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll leave that for the record. There were a couple of renderings included within the plan submitted as a set, but these are 2 new ones that I'm introducing this evening. As you heard Mr. Catanese mention in his opening statements, we're proposing to add 7 new dwelling units to the site, which presently has 1 freestanding building. The freestanding building is a historic single-family home that is really remaining untouched as a result of this development. We're going to build 7 new units behind that, arranged in 2 buildings, a building of 3 units and a building of 4 units. Each will be a townhouse style. It'll be 3 stories above elevated parking. Each will be about 2,300 square feet total gross floor area. The first floor will be 2 bedrooms and a laundry room. The middle floor, or second floor, will be your common living area, living room, dining room, kitchen. And the third floor will be 2 additional bedrooms. The style of the building, as you can kind of see from the rendering, I would characterize as kind of a coastal craftsman style. We use a mixture of materials in an effort to kind of bring the mass of the building down to a more pedestrian level. You'll see we start with a brick around the grade level. We transition to a hardy plank cement fiberboard siding for the next 2 levels, and then the roof, the third story is tucked within the roof with dormers, and that'll be a natural cedar roof with some metal roof accents. Something that's relatively, I won't say unique, but you don't see a lot of in our area are the deep overhangs we're proposing. If you look at the size of the overhangs on the rendering behind me, you'll see that they're about 3 feet deep. Those overhangs, in my opinion, really add a lot to the aesthetics and help kind of bring the scale of the building down. However, they will trigger the need for 2 setback variances, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later. You'll notice that they're arranged in a kind of a courtyard fashion if you look at the site plan. And they face inward to the courtyard rather than facing outward to the street. That has a couple of big benefits to the public by doing so. First of all, the streetscape along Yacht Avenue as you travel down, instead of looking at someone's driveway into a garage, you're looking at a nicely landscaped wall featured, and you're looking at a nice elevation of the building. The access is actually provided to each building from within the center courtyard. So we have 3 that are clustered together that are oriented in a north-south direction so that their front facade faces west towards the courtyard and beyond that into Cape Island Creek views. The east side faces Devil's Reach. The cluster of 4 is oriented along axis in an east-west direction. Their front doors face southwards towards the courtyard. Their rears faces the Lobster House and South Jersey Marine waterways. That's really kind of the rationale behind this placing, is to try and maximize those views. You'll notice that they're set kind of like an L-shaped configuration as far away from Washington Street as we can get. So those who are traveling down the main thoroughfare of Washington on the way out of town, rather than seeing a large massive building as they're leaving town, they're going to see a nice open courtyard, and the buildings will be a backdrop to those courtyards. We think that makes a much more street-friendly presence for the building. And hence, that's the arrangement that is relatively unique with this center courtyard fashion. I mean, most places along Yacht Avenue and most places in Cape May are oriented with the buildings facing the street. You're looking at driveways and whatnot leading from the street up to the buildings. We think this presents a much more nicer streetscape. The plans, as you see them now, have been before the HPC. They were very well received. We made particular point to bring out and talk about the size of the overhangs, recognize that it triggers the need for setback variance. We wanted to get the HPC's opinion about whether they believed, like we did, that they really enhanced the aesthetics. And they overwhelmingly agreed that it did. And for that reason, it gave us the comfort to continue proceeding with the application here this evening, despite the fact that it needs variances. I'll speak to the specifics of those variances.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great, thank you.
Each of the buildings has 1 eave that encroaches. The 3-unit building, this would be the 3-unit building. This would be the view you see coming down Washington Street before you make the bend. This is the 3-unit building. This eave at this corner encroaches about 28 inches into the setback. The building, by the way, the enclosed building is fully compliant with the setback. It's only this deep 3-foot eave that encroaches. It encroaches about 28 inches at this point, and it tapers down to that point of being a 0 encroachment, or near 0 encroachment. So only part of this eave encroaches, but it's this one segment here, and then on the 4-unit building, it's this eave, the entire length of that encroaches about 18 inches into the 5-foot setback. Again, the building walls on all the buildings are fully compliant. In fact, The only ones that are close to a step back are going to be the same walls that where we have the eve encroachment. This is at the, I think, a 6-foot setback where 5 feet's required. This building varies, but starts at about an 11-foot setback where 10's required. So it's good.
So, John, to the extent that these eaves may encroach, in your opinion, is that offset by the fact that the buildings are set back more than what is required when we think about open space, light and air, and other considerations of the setback requirement?
Absolutely, and the minor degree to which they do encroach are more than offset by the significantly greater setbacks that occur everywhere else on all sides of those buildings.
And when you went to the HPC, I know you've testified tonight that this improves the aesthetics of the building, but the HPC not only agreed in their meeting minutes of May 16th, those minutes state, motion made by Mr. Carroll to grant conceptual approval with HPC strongly encouraging zoning relief to allow the depth of the overhanging eaves. That motion was seconded by Mr. Testa and carried by a 7-0 vote, and we would add that as Exhibit A3. So the HPC has in fact gone on record in support of that small encroachment for the eaves, correct?
They have indeed. I might point out one last thing. The size of the buildings might be, I won't say unusual, but not that common in our area, but there's a couple architectural features we introduced to help kind of bring that scale down. One we've already talked about, and that's the depth of the eaves, these large eaves. Another thing that we've done is, again, tuck that third floor up under a roof where it's under dormers, so that gives the appearance of more of the 2.5-story building rather than a 3. And then some of the materials that we're using, by segmenting the brick at the base, using the hardy plank siding in the middle. That hardy plank siding, by the way, has a 10-inch reveal. Most of your common house siding would be a 4 or 6-inch reveal. So from a distance, which most people are going to see this, they're going to see the scale is being brought down by the fact that the planks that they normally associate with being 4 or 6 inches are actually 10. Those are all features we did intentionally to help bring the mass of the building down to a pedestrian-friendly scale.
John, the proposed design effectively clusters the units rather than using specifically permitted duplex-type construction, correct?
Correct.
But overall, the density conforms, correct?
It does.
And in your opinion, does clustering the units into the 2 buildings instead of spreading them out under, over, I don't know how many duplexes, does that promote open space, light, and air?
Absolutely. While we have the buildings that are tight together, then we have large open spaces. And again, those large open spaces were strategically located where the public would benefit from the most. That intersection where Yacht Avenue meets Washington Street on the way out of town. There you're going to see none of the building except as a backdrop. All that's open space, and that certainly is going to create a much more desirable visual environment for the public.
And to the extent the HPC has endorsed the architectural design, does that promote the historic district in town as well?
Absolutely.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Not unless there's questions.
Okay.
I have a question. I mean, the building looks beautiful, but I see that it says single-family detached are not permitted in this zone. So I look at that, and I don't know, whoever could answer this for me, I look at that area, and there are several, whether they're multiple family dwellings or attached dwellings there. Did they all have to obtain variances to get those built?
I can't answer that question. I don't know how some of them came to be. We are going to speak to the character of the neighborhood in Mr. Murphy's testimony and really the abundance of multifamily units in the neighborhood. So we're going to talk about them, but how they came to be there, we couldn't say.
I think the planning board just approved one across the street.
It did. It approved, and we're going to talk about that, a 4-unit attached dwelling right across Yacht Avenue at the intersection of Yacht and Washington.
Did that require a use variance? It didn't, right? Are they different zones? Is that why, or is it just that there's 4?
That is NC District.
Right behind the, there's like a vacant lot there. That was just approved for a 4-unit
we're gonna cover that, and
talk about that?
we are gonna talk about.
Is the townhouse set up, right as you go over the Cape May Bridge? Is that in the same zone?
That is NC as well. If you'll bear with us, we're gonna talk about this neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, we're happy to answer your questions,
I
but
think Mr. Murphy's their engineer's gonna do that. He's playing architect tonight, and he's the
correct.
engineer. So
I'm planner.
we're gonna hear from Brian.
Brian, I think you're up.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you could start just a little background on this project, because I know you've been at this a while, as has Mr. Klinger.
Mr. Klinger's been at this longer than I have. Mr. Klinger purchased his property about 20 years ago in '03. We came on board, I think it was '08, '09. We went to the DEP in '10. And the DEP, we went to CAFRA, went to the DEP to acquire a CAFRA and a waterfront development permit. We went there before we came here, quite candidly, because of where the site is located relative to the water, on the waterfront, as well as being in this neighborhood. It's very unique. And so we went there, and it was like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. With the regulations that they have and the project that we envisioned, so we worked with them, they massaged the regulations, and we received a CAFRA permit last year in '21. So if I could just kind of bring the board in, I know Mr. Halbruner did a good job, as did Mr. Catanese, as to where we are located, but we are on Yacht Avenue.
Would you like that slid a little forward?
If he's referring to something that's in his plans, we can just look at it right here.
You have, if you'd like them to be able to follow you, maybe you can slide it up a little bit.
This is A2 then? Is this A2 or
No,
just?
this is part of the package. We
Okay.
have this already.
We're on
Thank
A4,
you.
by the way. 1 and 2 are the.
Conceptual.
Oh, okay.
conceptuals.
I stepped
3 is
out.
the HPC minutes, and then we're on 4.
What's A4?
Nothing yet.
Oh, okay, thank you. Got
This
it.
is our site plan that was submitted as part of the application. And it's on Yacht Avenue, and there's some pictures. I have an aerial, which is not part of our submission, so we can mark this as A4.
Yep, we're up to A4, which is an aerial photograph of the site and surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, just to bring you in, I'm pointing to Washington Street right here. Here's the circle. Here's Yacht Avenue. It comes in, it makes a 90-degree, and it goes to the end. It's essentially a dead-end street. The project is highlighted here in red, and you'll see that there's, on the outside, the water side, there's 3 lines, and this project encompasses all of the property up to the furthest Waterwood red line, and that was issues regarding ownership, and we had to go back and trace deeds, and I won't bore you with the history of the site, other than say, this site is very unique. It was a marine railway, maybe a lot of you remember it as McCollum's Marina, and when Mr. Klinger purchased it, there were dilapidated boats in the marina. The site was overgrown, and so we went to the DEP. We had visions. We had an idea of a road coming in, and there's a gate up here by the intersection of Washington Street, of driving through. We looked at single families. We looked at duplexes, and over the years, we came up with the concept that is before you this evening, after a tremendous amount of thought. Essentially, this is sheet SP1 of the site plan that was submitted. To the right is the marina portion. To the left is Yacht Avenue, and again, there's that 90-degree that we were talking about. As Mr. Halbruner stated, there's 3 units in this structure. There's 4 units in this structure that overlook the water, and there is an existing single-family dwelling that's been renovated. When Mr. Klinger purchased the property, that was in my mind, an uninhabitable building, and he's restored it now to a beautiful structure. And there was also a mechanical building that's been renovated to be a marina bathhouse. With bathrooms in it, be handicap accessible, and that's tucked way into the corner, and that's also been preserved. So these are the two structures that have remained, and we have two structures that are being proposed. One's a 3-unit dwelling, the other one's a 4-unit dwelling. There's parking. You'll be driving in off of Yacht Avenue. Every unit will have 2 parking spaces, one inside the structure and then on the pad outside the structure. In addition, there's 1 additional parking space per unit that's off the Yacht Avenue. So you drive in, you park, you're able to turn around and drive out. There's also 7 parking spaces that are associated with the marina. When we went to the DEP, it was important to them that we have a community marina with small boats. We all know the huge boats over there at South Jersey Marina. These are, the boat slips are 17 feet, 20 feet at the largest. There's boat slips available for jet skis and smaller vessels. The idea, as this would be a community marina, and the DEP wanted a certain number of slips to service the community, they felt that 20 boat slips is what was reasonable, and that's what's provided on the structure. We have parking off of Yacht Avenue, albeit it's pull in and back out parking. But we'll discuss that in a little bit. I'm kind of straying from where we are.
That's okay. So I think one of the things that's important is talking about sort of the raw site. What's permitted here in terms of potential uses, the marina operations, and the extent of the marina operations that you're proposing compared to what would be permitted?
Sure. Just from a marina standpoint, you go back here to the aerial.
And Brian, let me say once more, so the record's clear. This property is in the R5 zoning district, correct?
It is in the R5 zoning district, that's correct.
And the R5 permits residential uses, including side-by-side twins or duplexes, correct?
Correct.
The property is also in a harbor overlay zone, which permits marinas and other water-dependent uses, right?
True statement, correct.
So, like all the properties on the waterfront, it's got 2 layers of zones over top of it, right?
It does.
Got it. So though the attached dwellings are not specifically permitted because of the number of units in a row, residential is permitted by virtue of the R5 regulations.
Yes.
Marina is permitted by virtue of the harbor overlay district, correct?
That's correct. And then we had a 3rd layer, which was the DEP layer, and the requirements that came with that. So we were trying to massage all these things together, and I guess I'll flip over to this one. This is sheet SP4 of the site plan. And so the marina is over to the right. And, let me show you what the marina layout will look like. This was part of the CAFR. It was not part of your application, part of the application before this, but I think it deserves to be shown. And that's the number of slips. And again, it's, as I stated, it's a small neighborhood marina. The boat slips these are 12 feet, 12 feet by 25. Over here are 12 by 20. 12 by 20, and this is 12 by 17, and some jet ski docks.
Brian, why don't we mark that as Exhibit A5, and that's the marina layout. That was not part of the package, and we offered just to show you the number, layout, and particularly the size of the slips.
So the slips are public slips? There's no assigned slips for the units?
No, that's not true.
No, no.
That's for the,
8 will be assigned and associated with the 8 residential units.
Okay, that wasn't clear yet.
12 of the boat slips would then be available for lease to the public in one manner or another.
is that the way they've been operating,
Well,
the
the,
building? I mean, I could see today, like when I was down there looking at all the docks, are really nice. You have that nice walkway that Aaronberg put in there, whoever, but has it been operating? Have you been operating it? No. As a marina? No? Okay. All right, I was just curious.
Yeah, safe to say a few friends' boats are in there right now?
Yeah, it's just an overflow and on an emergency basis, storms and that, you know, we haven't objected to that. Usually when there's high water on Yacht Avenue, we've always been able to accommodate whoever. I mean, it's any port in a storm, so to speak.
Well, you're speaking to the boats, however, yeah, and there were, at one point in time, Brian, there were more docks there, but that has been scaled back through this process, so there's minimal docks on site right now, correct?
Correct. Right now, you'll just see there's some floating docks that go around the perimeter. There were an arrangement. There were some boats out there. Say when Mr. Klinger took it, there were a series of boats over here in this area. There was no water at low tide out there. Those boats sat in the mud, and when the tide came in, some of them floated and some of them didn't. So when Mr. Klinger, that's a good point. There were dilapidated boats that were in the marina. As you stated, there's a brand-new bulkhead that was put in by Ehrenberg, which required a DEP permit, and that was put in. Dredging had to be done. This was all dredged out a couple of years ago to allow for adequate water depth for all the boats that are being proposed in here. There was a a fuel dock that was part of McCollum's, and with that, there were underground storage tanks. Those tanks have all been removed. The DEP has signed off on them. We have an NFA letter saying that it's clean. You may remember there was a pool here. There was King Neptune was here. So Mr. Klinger, as part of this approval process, also has spent a significant amount of money cleaning it up just so it's safe as much as anything else. And that's where we are tonight. And so it's going to be a neighborhood marina. As Mr. Catney stated, 8 of the boat slips will be associated with the units, 1 per unit, and the remainder will be available to the public. Excuse me.
So Brian, we speak to marina, and the definition of a marina generally would include a broad range of services, such as not only dockage, hauling, service, potentially sales, pressure washing, a forklift, storage. All those things usually go with a marina, correct?
That's correct. And the DEP at one point thought this would be a good place for dry stack storage, like to have on Pier 47, where you have all the boats racked up in racks, and you come with fork trucks to bring them down. You can set them in the water. And the infrastructure, we felt, was not suitable for that, not on this site.
So what's proposed meets the definition of a marina because it's got docks and there's going to be boats there. But in terms of a full-service marina, this is, in your opinion, fair to say a low-intensity marina use?
Exactly. This is what in our discussions with the DEP, and he gave us a permit, the vision here was that it would be a neighborhood marina to service the walking public from Yacht Avenue, from Village Green, from the north end of Cape May City, to be able to walk here and have a small boat, the day trippers, not one of the large 60, 70 footers that are across the way. It wouldn't fit. You couldn't fit but maybe one boat like that in this marina. So that was never the vision.
Now, the existing, I guess, storage building is proposed to become a bathroom or bathhouse. That's a DEP requirement, correct?
Correct.
And you looked at the historic aerials of the site. That is a long-standing building. In other words, that's not new construction. That's a pre-existing condition that, as far as your investigation, goes back many years.
Oh, absolutely it does. I went back, and part of this project, we went back through aerial photograph. I think Orville and Wilbur flew the flights that we were looking at. And again, the whole history of this particular property is unique. But the structures that are proposed to remain, which are the single-family dwelling and the bathhouse, have been there for 30-plus years. If not, yeah, it's going to be longer than that, really.
Good. 1840. Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point then, it appears that the decision was made to move towards the clustered development that we're proposing today.
Yes.
Attached dwellings in lieu of what's permitted in the zone, that would be a group of duplexes, correct?
That's correct.
I mentioned it in my opening, and I know you're going to potentially speak on this later, but to be clear, the density conforms, correct? The result of clustering these buildings is not to get additional units on the site, is that right?
That's a true statement. We could put more units on the site, but the vision here was to create a community amongst itself, to be able to have a courtyard, to be able to have the view of the water and a view of Devil's Reach on the other side.
So let's get to Mr. Venuto's comment, if you would, as to how this will fit into the neighborhood and whether this type of building, be it multifamily or attached, fits into the neighborhood.
Sure.
What surrounds it? I think you can use the aerial that you.
I do.
up for that,
I
correct?
can use that, and what I will do is, I will also discuss density at this point, our property, and I'm talking strictly the upland portion, which is just, my pen's going around, it's just the land area. So the property is larger, it's about 60%, roughly 60% uplands and 40% water. So we have the right to include the water in our calculations, but as you'll see, as I go through this exercise, why I chose to go the way that I did. So, the Devil's Reach Marina, which is back here, is 16...
No, hold on.
Yep.
Come down a little further, you're on the wrong one. Devil's Reach Marina.
Yep, I'm right here, it's right here, yep, I'm sorry, yep, thank you. The Devil's Reach Marina has 16 units, approximately 19,715 square feet of upland area, and that comes out to 1,280 square feet.
And when you say one, you mean 1 unit per every 1,000? Give me the number.
Correct. Each unit has 1,280 square feet per unit.
And we're not talking about floor area. No, this is density, right?
Just the land area, the upland area. So I have 19,000, we'll say 20,000 for round numbers, 20,000 square feet of upland and 16 units. So each unit has 1,300 square feet of upland,
Of ground area.
of ground area.
1 unit per roughly 1,300 square feet, you said?
That's correct. 1,280 to be precise.
What other buildings, and that is a multifamily structure, 16 units.
It's 16 units, Devil's Reach Marina Condominium is the name of it.
Okay, we'll mark that as Exhibit A6. Sure. And that's a photograph of that structure.
Yes, and I'm referring to the aerial that's marked as A4. Then we have, at the back, when I was confused earlier, that's a 10-unit, and that's the Victoria Harbor condominium. And there's approximately 12,775 square feet of upland area. So at 10 units, that math is easy, it's 1,280 square feet per unit. So that would be A7.
I'm sorry, 1,280?
1280.
That's exactly the same number as the last one. Did I
Is
write?
that land area? Same?
Yeah, roughly, it's, and again, I did not survey it. What I did was this is to scale, and I assumed that the upland area came to the bulkhead line.
I'm just checking my notes, Brian.
Sure.
Just make sure that I wrote 1,280 per unit for the first one, and then this one, I just wrote 1,280 per unit.
Correct.
And I just want to make sure that that's correct.
That's correct, true statement.
Density is the same on those two.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then we have 1507 Yacht Avenue, which is immediately adjacent to our property. That uplands is just here around the building, and that's 6,550 square feet. So at 10 units, that's 655 square feet per unit.
Is that the one that's currently under construction?
It's being renovated right now, correct. We chatted with the owner the other day, and he's just upgrading. He's not reducing or expanding it in any way.
And Brian, the 3 properties that you just cited are all in the same R5 and HO overlay district. Same
That's
zoning
correct.
district, same street, same neighborhood.
is part of the neighborhood. Like as I stated, Yacht Avenue begins on Washington Street and runs to the end. The first one, the second one, the first one, second one, the third one I mentioned. That was A8, was that photograph. And then the one right around the corner, which is known as 1488 Washington Street, the uplands on that is 9,000 square feet. And there's 5 units there, so that's 1,800 square feet per unit. So, and that would be A9.
Brian, now, we also mentioned that the site directly across Yacht Avenue to the south was recently approved for a 4-unit attached dwelling, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the density of that site?
I believe it's about 1,500 square feet per unit. And that one, of course, has no water area.
I want to make sure your testimony's correct on that one.
All right, let me double check.
Then,
I have that written down, I just don't have it right here at my fingertips.
What are we checking, Andrew?
the density on the site just across the street we mentioned was just approved at the planning board? Yeah. Brian, if I have a copy of that resolution. If I could refresh your memory, does 1 per 5,000
That's it.
sound accurate?
Yep. Yep. And again, there is no water area in there, so we have all of the previous ones I just discussed, they all have water associated with them. And approximately it's the same ratio that we have.
Is that the lot that has the seashells on it?
Correct.
It's also an odd-shaped lot that has like a little piece that sticks off of it that they're putting extra parking on. So
Yes.
it's counting in their numbers, but it's not really part of the rectangle, so to speak.
Correct, there's,
The board should remember that's not in the same zone.
Different zone.
right.
So the other properties you talked about first are more pertinent to the zone.
Certainly agree with that.
So and the point is not to get lost in the numbers, but to show that the density that's being proposed here with this project is less dense than the other multifamily that exists on Yacht Avenue. That's by design. That's to make this a more attractive project, and it was the opinion that it was reasonable for this site. It wasn't going to cram it all onto the site and make it so people are bumping elbows, but rather have a higher-end project and one that Mr. Klinger could be very proud of. As Mr. Halbruner stated, was the opening at the intersection of Washington and Yacht Avenue. Get back to that view. You know, I think I'll go to this next sheet. It's a little bit.
Mr. Earls, what's the address of that property, the new approval?
And I'm referring to SP4 of the site plan. And
Hold on, I'm happy to get that answer for you.
Can I hear the question?
I asked, what is the address of the new approval that we were talking about?
1404 Washington. I believe it's 1404 Washington.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, Washington Avenue is coming where my pen is. Yacht Avenue is perpendicular to it. This is the open area, as you can see with Mr. Halbruner's rendering right there. That's the view. If you were driving from my eyes down Washington Street, you can see how open that is. And I want to add something else, is the view corridor on Yacht Avenue, right here, right past the existing single-family dwelling that's going to remain. Between that dwelling and the bathhouse, there's a beautiful view that goes right down Spicer's Creek. With this, the way that it's designed, that view corridor stays. Anybody walking up and down Yacht Avenue has that view today, that view will be there tomorrow. Up here, or the condominiums, so it's set back, and the bathhouse remains, and it's already tucked as far as it can be over into the corner. So
Brian,
maintaining a view corridor is important.
And let's talk about that being set back a little bit, because this site is, you said, unique. One of the things that makes it unusual is that that is a basin that was dug out many, many years ago, correct?
It was. It was. And as I stated earlier, if you were to look at the survey, and we have it highlighted on the aerial, these lines here were different at times when it was excavated. This is the original line, the one closest to the water, toward the center of Spicer's Creek. And then for whatever reason, it was excavated. At one point, it was even a railway. So it was a large building that came across the whole site. You really couldn't see where the water began and ended, but
Brian, you said railway, like railroad?
like a marine railway, to bring a boat onto rails and bring them out of the water, like Tony's Marine Railway over by the Lobster House, if we remember that. It was a similar situation here, and they had a large structure to work on the boats, and for whatever reason, that had come and went, and Mr. McCullum, I think, had a permit to fill this, and it expired. Long story short, the line you see where the bulkhead is what we agreed to with the DEP. That was a reasonable line, and that all the development would take place.
The impact
Respective
of
of that.
that, however, is that because that basin is set back, and then the waterfront structure that is proposed for this site is going to be set, if you would, stay where you are.
Okay,
Stay
sure.
on that one. It's going to be set back so much further than the buildings left and right in terms of sight lines, correct?
True.
So to the extent that that building is proposed to be, I think, 15 feet from the bulkhead, is that right?
Yes.
Because it's pushed back by the basin, how does that impact the view corridors of the neighbors left and right?
I'm drawing on the aerial about where 15 feet would be, just kind of eyeing it in. So the view corridors for everybody on Yacht Avenue, everybody down here has the view unchanged. Everybody from this condominium, the view for the water, unchanged. The view down Washington Street is limited today. They'll have an open area which will open up this intersection. So, albeit the structures that are proposed are larger than what's there today, the negative effect of the views are minimal. To be able to maintain the view of the water, and these condominiums here that are proposed will be able to look right down Yacht Avenue and across right over to the Lobster House. So I like to take some credit for that, but really I can't. The only thing we did was not to propose anything in that narrow area. And with our discussions with the DEP, we came out with what we thought was a very reasonable project and something that we all can be very proud of.
And Brian, as we look at this aerial, the other issue we have, of course, is the small bathhouse is proposed to remain right here, correct?
True.
But this building next to it, the 10 unit, has no ground level living space, right? It's elevated.
That's true.
So the owners and occupants of this building are going to look right across, right? Because their ground level is just parking. That bathhouse is not going to negatively impair their views, will it?
No, and it's there today, and they have, the views as they come across, they have the views here, and of course, there won't be any change going out towards Spicer's Creek.
Got it. And the same for this property. Again, be able to look right across the top of that building, right across those parking spaces, and have that view of the water preserved. Fair enough?
That's absolutely correct.
And Yacht Avenue is fair to state, a walkable street, right? It's a street that is walked regularly.
It's primarily a walking street.
And as folks walk along Yacht Avenue, they're really dealing with very little in terms of water views, are they?
Correct. As you walk down, you can see the density. We didn't talk about the single-family dwellings. Even the density of each of these, on some of them, the water is only 10, 15 feet from the right-of-way line. These are the old boathouses. And it is unique as an understatement. But to say there's any type of a view as you walk down here, there is no view. Until you get down almost to the very end where the Coast Guard Auxiliary is. And then as you come around on the other side, again, you don't have any view of Devil's Reach until you get to the one large condominium project. They have a driveway that you can see the Devil's Reach, or opposite this site on Yacht Avenue. So it's amazing that we can build a project at this location of this size and have almost no negative effect to the view corridors.
Now, as to the marina and the marina park, do you want to talk about the marina parking?
Sure. So, as I stated earlier, every unit has a parking space inside, a parking space outside, and a third parking space dedicated on-site. So everybody pulls in off of Yacht Avenue and pulls out on Yacht Avenue. With the DEP, they wanted this to be a neighborhood-type marina, so they wanted parking for the neighbors. Albeit, many of the people will be walking there, but we have this parking area that most will be a car there, so it maintains the view corridors that we were just talking about. Yacht Avenue in this area is approximately 20 feet of paving. We typically like 25 feet to back out to be able to turn a car safely. So we brought the parking spaces in an additional 5 feet off the right-of-way line and the full 18 feet for a parking space. We had an accessible parking space that can either go to the marina, there's public access that goes completely across the waterfront, respecting everything, even the bathhouse is accessible. This parking, we believe, will be used for the marina and part of Yacht Avenue. And you say, well, back out parking, we typically don't like that. And it is something that, as a general statement, we don't like back out parking onto a road. But Yacht Avenue is very different. Yacht Avenue, as you walk down the street, almost all of the structures, except the large condominium across the street, have back out parking on the Yacht Avenue. Some places have no parking, and they have to park just in front of their dwelling in the right-of-way. And it works. It's always been that way. It probably always will be that way. So we have the way the geometry is right here in this area. As someone comes into Yacht Avenue, they're able to get the right page. As you're leaving to go out Yacht Avenue, you're able to see all the cars, and they have a good view, so they can pull out safely. As you come in, you're able to have a good line, and these people can back out, have a good line of sight from the intersection, and back out to, well, you're going to be leaving on Yacht Avenue. The speed limit on Yacht Avenue is posted, it's 10 miles an hour. It's not even a regular city street at 25 miles an hour. It's posted at 10 miles an hour, and so we believe that based upon the historic back out parking on Yacht Avenue and in this immediate area, this is no different than the parking at any of the hotels in the area on the waterfront, where people just back out and people drive in and they make the adjustment. We believe that associated with the marina, this is a good use and a great place for it.
Brian, Yacht Avenue's unique in that it's not a thoroughfare, correct?
It is not a thoroughfare.
It's not a tourist destination. Is that an accurate statement?
I think people go there just to look at some of the structures, but no, it's not a destination, but it is some place that deserves to be looked at at one point in life.
In terms of traffic, number of trips, right? In other words, certainly back out parking at a restaurant on Beach Avenue or at a shopping center on Washington Street would present grave concerns for you, would they not?
Absolutely it would. It would, because there is the turnover. For every seating, you'll have a turnover. If it was the Wawa right down this end of the street, the cars are coming and going all the time. We would not want that type of we wouldn't want back out parking onto a roadway on something like a restaurant or a Wawa. What's good here, unique here, is that it's associated with the marina. So you come in the morning and you leave in the evening. It's an all-day affair. We believe that the type of boats that are being proposed here with the small boats, they're going to be day trippers. They're going to go out for the morning, maybe go out and ride the jet ski for a couple of hours. They're going to come in and then leave. And it's not going to be high turnover. And going over the trip generation, it'll be the same, if not less, than the single-family dwellings.
And Brian, because these are going to be seasonal slip holders, correct?
Correct.
The people that come there are going to be people that are familiar with Yacht Avenue and familiar with the traffic patterns, will they not?
Correct.
How does that factor in?
It factors in a large way because one thing we have to do to people, when you have something that's different, we like things to be the same all the time. So people are used to stop signs. They're octagonal, they're red. That we see them and we know what to do. Because it takes a period of time to train people to know what to expect, to know how to negotiate things. Where here, like you said, Mr. Catanese, that it'll be the same people using the same parking spaces, and they're used to it. They know Yacht Avenue. They know it's 10 miles an hour. They know that the people coming in or going out, the traffic will be minimal. The bigger thing they're going to have to look for is the pedestrian traffic, which is no different than the parking at a mall, at the stores, any place else. When you're backing out into the drive aisle at the mall, you look for pedestrians. And obviously, we're going at a very slow rate of speed. We think that, albeit it's very unique, is not something that we would propose in the center of town, but we feel on Yacht Avenue that this parking is safe, it's reasonable, and it's acceptable.
And is it better than putting a building there, in your opinion, in order to preserve that view corridor?
It is. It is. And that was something that the state felt also, was the maintaining the view corridors. Many times of the years and in a day, there'll be no cars in these parking spaces. So at the most, you may have a van that has, 6 feet in height. But for all the dwellings on the other side of the street, their view corridors will be maintained.
Now, we spoke about some of the setbacks, particularly on the main buildings, and I particularly want to call your attention. We asked for a setback variance here, next to Fleming Real Estate, correct?
Yes, we did.
And we asked for a setback variance here, right?
Yes.
But in fact, this property really outperforms setback requirements. You've already spoken about the open space here off of the corner of Washington Street, but the building continues to pull back as we head down Yacht Avenue, right?
True.
So, and to the extent that we've got an existing non-conforming historic structure, that'll remain where it is, right?
Yes.
But given its small size, does that have a significant impact on the open space or the effectively crowding or not crowding Yacht Avenue?
No, I think it's part of the history of Yacht Avenue. As he said, it's been there, I guess, since the dawn of time. Mr. Klinger had a contractor come in and do a remarkable job of renovating it, the existing structure. But you're right, to be able to pull back the views the way that they are, and to open up the intersection, it just came together very well.
So have you spoken, as you have spoken to the benefits of clustering, let's talk about the alternative, because this zone permits duplexes, correct?
It does.
It permits them on lots at a density of 1 per 2,500 square feet, so you need 5,000 square feet for a duplex, and you need 40 feet to frontage, correct?
Correct.
So on this lot, what's the run? What's the length of this leg, that first leg of Yacht Avenue as we turn off of Washington?
It's about 125, 130 feet.
So by right, 1, 2, 3 duplexes could be constructed right along this section of Yacht Avenue alone, correct?
Correct, with 6 driveways.
6 driveways, all with cars backing out into this section of Yacht Avenue, which carries the Wawa traffic out, right?
Correct.
Is that a better or worse zoning proposal? I think I'm
That's a
teeing this
disaster.
one up for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And in addition, that would leave sufficient space out here for more, at least one more duplex structure
Correct.
here, with
Yep.
additional driveways backing out, correct?
Correct.
So when we talk about this clustering and we promote this as a benefit, that's the difference, right?
It is. And going through this project for as many years as Mr. Klinger has gone through this, there's been so many ideas, and some had more merit than others. The backing out onto that part of Yacht Avenue would be a disaster. We at one point talked about having the roadway come over. There's an existing gate right at the intersection of Yacht Avenue and Washington that's there today. And there was talk about having the road go all the way through, and that was nixed from a safety standpoint. And as you sort of bringing this together, it really brings a sense of community to this.
So the existing driveway right here is going to be removed,
That's correct.
and getting that away from Washington Street is good, correct?
Absolutely it is.
I also want to talk about sidewalk, because Yacht Avenue really has no sidewalk to speak of as we head down, and the road effectively works as a roadway and pedestrian way, right?
It does.
And how does that work in the first section, and how does it change when we pass the historic structure and approach this neighborhood? And I want to talk about the proposed sidewalks and public
Sure.
safety.
So let me get back into the aerial. As Mr. Katney was just saying, this is a walking street. There are no sidewalks for the length of Yacht Avenue. And down here, it works well. It's like I said, it's like the drive aisle at a shopping mall. People back out, there's people walking, and they all respect one another. It's a slow rate of speed, and it works. But as you make the turn and you go past the structure that's been renovated, it starts to change, because here, where my finger is, that's Wawa, and the people pull out of Wawa, they pull right onto Yacht Avenue, and they drive out to Washington Street to leave town. So this intersection here, there's a lot of traffic, and people, as they're pulling out, they're looking down Washington, they may glance down Yacht, but people walking, they have to slow down there. There are no sidewalks there right now, and there's vegetation that kind of leans over the into the right-of-way.
So I'm sorry, you said there's no sidewalks there right
There
now?
are no sidewalks there today.
All right, so
Correct.
what's proposed to improve public safety as pedestrians make their way towards the Wawa exit from Yacht Avenue?
The sidewalks for most of the frontage on Yacht Avenue. I say most because the existing single-family dwelling is so tight to the right-of-way that a sidewalk wouldn't be reasonable. So what we did, we brought the sidewalk right along Yacht Avenue. You're able to walk around the single-family dwelling, cross over. Of course, these curb cuts are handicap accessible. Able to walk on a sidewalk up to the intersection where Wawa is over here to the lower left-hand side. If you want to go to Wawa, you can cross the street at that point. Or if you want to go to the city, you're able to walk on a sidewalk up to Washington Avenue and pick up the existing sidewalk that takes you over to Mayor's Tavern or in that area.
Okay, so this path will be available to people who have accessibility issues, correct?
That's correct.
Fair enough to say most people are going to continue to walk down Yacht Avenue, but when they pass the house, they're going to have an option that they don't currently have to get up onto the safety of a sidewalk that doesn't exist, right?
True statement.
And they'll have the ability to continue on that sidewalk right around the turn, and that doesn't exist right now.
It does not, correct.
And then, when they leave their home on Yacht Avenue and they make their way to any of the restaurants or other destinations that may be over here on Skellinger's Landing, there's a safe pedestrian pathway, and that's all created as a result of this.
That's correct. It carries the people from Yacht Avenue into the city via sidewalk.
Murphy, this parking that's going to be down here for the marina, are they going to be, like, they're going to have a permit, you know, to park their boat in there? Is it going to be associated with a parking spot? Is there any, are you gonna be controlling that?
Well, no, the regulations don't call for it. I think it's 0.6 parking spaces per boat slip, because, you know, boats sit, you know, more often than not, the dock, the parking spaces will be empty, because then the boats will be sitting in the slip, right? A lot of boats sit around a while. So they may have to put some type of a pass on it, but you can't associate one slip per space. it may just be like a placard on your rearview mirror or something like that to control who parks there. Does that answer your question?
There's 12 spots and 7 spaces, so they can't use that.
Yeah, but again, that's,
He brings his friend like Graydon to go fishing with him, he can't.
I sold my boat. No, but the parking is conforming. In fact, Brian, total parking requirement for this site is 24 and 28 is proposed, correct?
Correct, 24 and a half, and we did take advantage, we do have a charging station which allows us to reduce the required parking by 1. So it's 25 and a half, brought down to 24 and a half. Yeah, and it's 28.
It's a lot. And Brian, you would testify, that's important in that area, because if you can't park on site, you end up over on Massachusetts Avenue or on Texas Avenue or somewhere else, right, Brian?
That's correct. And the day-to-day parking, the everyday parking, you're able to drive in and drive out. So you're looking as you drive in and you're looking as you drive out. And to be able to do that, have adequate turnaround and adequate parking, and still have attractive structures. I'm not trying to put 3 parking spaces in a structure where nobody ever uses a third one. This is reasonable. This is something that people can use.
Brian, there's some pretty impressive engineering in terms of the grading of the site I think the board should hear about, and perhaps the conceptual over here from the corner of Washington Avenue helps to show that.
Sure. The segue for that is that the DEP has a requirement called flood hazard requirements. And as we all know, flooding is an issue in all the barrier islands. And how do we mitigate the damage that's associated with it? So what they want to do is to try to elevate as much as they can. But we're stuck with the elevation of Yacht Avenue and the perimeter. So as we come down, we have a pretty steep grade that comes down to Yacht Avenue, and we are at Yacht Avenue and the existing stormwater structure that is in there. One of the advantages of not coming out on Yacht Avenue, A, from a safety standpoint, and 2, we were able to raise this elevation up. And if you look, here I'm looking at Mr. Halbruner's plan here. So what we're proposing to do is to put a retaining wall around the perimeter. So as it comes up, it's going to be an attractive wall with landscaping in front of it. So you're going to have Yacht Avenue, the actual asphalt, curbing, sidewalk, landscaping, a decorative wall, wrought iron style fencing, landscaping, and then your structures. So we're bringing this up, but we're doing it in a way we believe as you drive down Washington Street, this is going to be the focal point for probably 500, if not 1,000 feet.
Brian, the entire site will be graded to satisfy the DEP, but it's also all going to pitch and distribute all of its stormwater to the tidal waters, correct? It's not even going into the city system. It's self-sufficient in that respect?
The DEP has very strict regulations for stormwater. There's clean water and there's dirty water. Clean water is water that hits the rooftops, hits the grass. So we capture that in an independent system. I'm looking here at sheet still SP4. Capture that water and it goes out to the tidally flowed water. So it's straight piped, comes down to downspouts, goes into pipe, worked its way around, and goes out into the harbor, or more correctly, Spicer's Creek. The dirty water, which is the water that's been driven on, that could have contaminants, road salts, debris from a car, that water, as it's graded, as it comes down and it goes to go out Yacht Avenue, it's captured by the inlets. It's brought over. Also, the parking spaces that are associated with the marina, we have a slot drain, so it all slopes down to the slot drain, and it connects with the stormwater that comes from the roadway, and it goes through a stormwater filter that's been approved by the DEP. There's only a handful of different systems, and it gave us a choice, and this was the one we felt fit the site the best. So it cleans the water, and then it goes out into the harbor. This does require maintenance. There's a whole maintenance plan that is part of this project. The city is, without getting too far into the weeds of stormwater, the DEP requires the city to make sure that this is cleaned. It's their responsibility to make sure
And that'll be the owner's responsibility.
that'll be the homeowner's responsibility. That's correct.
All right, so let's talk about the variances specifically that are requested. And
Sure.
we can move through those, and we'll get to the standards. And
Perfect.
all right, first and foremost, we talked about two uses, that is marina and residential. There is marina and residential there, but that will be expanded, correct? That's a D2 variance, right?
That's correct.
Additionally, the proposed attached dwellings are not permitted on site, but we've talked about the reasons for the clustering and the view corridors, correct?
That's correct.
So let's talk about the existing nonconformities, and then we'll talk about the proposed in terms of the bulk nonconformities.
Sure.
First, the historic home has a front yard setback of 1.2 to the porch and 6.9 to the building. That's proposed to remain, correct?
True statement, yes.
And the proposed bathhouse, again, side yard setbacks, I don't have those dimensions, but we've requested variances for those existing conditions as well, correct?
That's correct. And that is, for the bathhouse, it's 1.2 feet.
And Brian, because, as we indicated in your testimony, that's just one story, it's a small accessory building, and most of the surrounding buildings have their living space higher, will that have a significant negative impact on open space, light and air?
Not in my opinion, because it's bordered by a fence, and it's the drive aisle for the condominium association next door.
And in fact, right here at the condominium association next door, there is a concrete pad where their dumpster is
That's correct.
kept out, right?
Yes.
So that's what that's going to be next to. Okay. Now, the proposed nonconformities, we already heard the building setbacks to the eaves, correct?
Yes.
And proposed connection to the city's stormwater drainage system is typically required, but because this will drain to the bay, this will not go to the city system. Believe it or not, that requires a variance, right?
Correct, and what it does, it lessens the burden on the city system.
Okay. We've asked for a variance for the curb cut length along the proposed marina spaces,
True, yes.
the setback to the street, which we really didn't talk about too much. The setback to the street for those parking spaces is less than what's required, but is that consistent with Yacht Avenue?
It is. Well, if anything, it's consistent, in some places even more beneficial than within Yacht Avenue. We have the 18-foot parking space and 5 feet to the right-of-way, which allows the 20-foot cartway, provides a 25-foot wide back-out area, which is standard for backing out for passenger car. That's a standard we use for all drive aisles everywhere. So we have adequate room to park, won't be any K-turns or special efforts required to get in and out of the parking space.
And to the extent that we've requested a parking setback on the west side of the building, those parking spaces are proposed to be slightly less than what's required, the ones that are along that retaining wall, correct?
Yes, it's a little bit closer. It's only 3 feet. I think the requirement is 5 feet of a buffer, and we have 3 feet, but it is landscaped in that area, and does have the retaining wall right there with a fence.
And does the landscaping and the retaining wall mitigate the impact of that?
In my opinion, yes, it does.
So let's talk about the standards. We've asked for the D1 and D2 standard variances to the extent that we're proposing a new variance. D1 variances, and any D variance can be addressed based on hardship or special reasons, correct?
Correct.
Do either of those exist here?
Both exist. The hardship is the incredibly irregular shape of the lot, and plus it has 2 frontages, plus the waterfront. So it's got 2 fronts on Yacht Avenue as well as the waterfront, and it's a very, very unusual shape. So, yes,
Does that create practical difficulties?
it does, very practical.
So let's talk about the purposes of zoning as well. What purposes of zoning, if any, are advanced by this application?
The purposes of zoning, there's a few. Let's look my place here. One is the promotion of safety, and it says promotes from safety from fire, flood, panic, and other natural man-made disasters. And as I stated earlier, the flood hazard requirements, we're raising the whole site, so the entire site will be elevated and graded to Yacht Avenue, and the stormwater will flow to Spicer's Creek, and we meet the flood hazard requirements dictated to us by the DEP. We also are promoting light, air, and open space. The density is approximately half of what's permitted in the zoning. There's, you can see there's a lot of setbacks, albeit we are asking for a variance in some cases, but you can see that they're isolated spots. It's not a whole building that's encroaching. They fall back. I think that the design of the concept is very good. And the clustering of the units into two new buildings, it preserves the view of the water from Yacht Avenue, and it keeps the open space from Washington Street as you drive out of the city. It maintains that open space. I think E is another one that is going on, is to establish appropriate population densities. And we believe that this project specifically, because it's, again, about half of what we theoretically could put on this site, but it was more important to Mr. Klinger to have a higher end and a sense of community versus just get as many as you can so I can get out of town in a hurry. And the G is to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. There is an established need for boat slips in this area, especially the smaller ones. The larger boats, we have the South Jersey Marina across the way, beautiful boats over there, but I know I couldn't afford one of them in 10 lifetimes. But a 20-footer, 15-footer, we have them for the community. If people can walk down there, take the boat out fishing, have some jet skis to go out and enjoy the recreational area, I think it works out very well.
Now, to the extent that one entrance and one exit for the residential uses and the extra parking spaces that are proposed on site would be an improvement over the perfectly permitted number of duplexes with cars backing out, does this design promote the free flow of traffic?
I think it does. It takes all the traffic away from that entrance, I'll call it the short run of Yacht Avenue. There is an entrance there today that gets eliminated. Everything gets pulled around the corner. It's drive in, drive out. It's a significant upgrade.
John spoke to promoting a desirable visual environment and promoting the conservation of historic sites based on the architectural plans. Do you agree with that testimony?
Do. We had an extensive historic preservation review by the DEP. Obviously, they found it acceptable, and it gave us a permit. The renovation of the existing structure is awesome, the two existing structures. And I think that the layout of the buildings was very creatively done. It wasn't my review, I just drew it.
Does the creation of the sidewalk to create a safe passageway down the first leg of Yacht Avenue to Washington promote public health and, more importantly, safety, to get those pedestrians out of the middle of Yacht Avenue where they currently walk?
It does. And chatting with the people on Yacht Avenue, as you stated earlier, they do walk up and down Yacht Avenue, and it's common for them to walk into the city, to walk over to the Seaview Tavern, walk over to Mayor's, have something to eat, perhaps have a drink, and to be able to walk back on the sidewalk or walk there on the sidewalk just clearly increases the safety aspect.
Purpose P is to enable the use of effective planning tools, including clustering, to preserve open space and historic sites. Do we fit into that purpose of zoning?
Spot on. It's spot on. You know, to be able to bring these buildings closer together, to maximize the view corridors, it's, again, I can't take credit for it, but it's just awesome. It's as good as anything I could have imagined.
The Home Builders League case added another purpose to zoning, which is preservation of the neighborhood character. And to the extent that we propose a low-intensity marina use without all those additional services and noise and everything else that goes with it, and combine that with a residential use, is that consistent with the character of this neighborhood?
It is. Yacht Avenue is a very unique neighborhood. I've been aware of it for the last 30 years. We're doing a Cape May Harbor project. We came over and spent time over on Yacht Avenue. It's changed. It's changed a lot over the years, but it's I think, much to the better. It's a very unique section of Cape May City. It's got a very unique flavor, and I think this project dovetails well into that flavor.
Is this site particularly suited for the proposed uses?
It is. It is. It is. Just the way the geometry is, with needing the marina and the multifamily, it all comes together very well.
Now, we've also applied under the flexible C standard, and typically that requires the purposes of zoning to be advanced by the application and that the benefits substantially outweigh the detriment. So the purposes of zoning that you just testified to as to the D variance as special reasons, do they also constitute purposes of zoning that are advanced for the purpose of the C2 flexible C variance?
They do. Clearly, in my mind, my professional opinion, the benefits strongly outweigh the detriments.
And can this relief be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zone plan or the zoning ordinance?
Yes, I strongly believe that, again, for the reasons that I stated earlier.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy?
I have a question for you. Your drawings call for 20 slips, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you're going to, eight are going to go to the units.
That's correct.
Okay, so that leaves 7, or that leaves 12, and you got 7 parking spaces for the remaining slips. What happened, where are the other 5 cars
No,
going to park?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the parking standard, as Mr. Catney stated earlier, the DEP requires 0.6 parking space per boat slip. And the logic is that every boat slip is not going to be used every day. You may go out on Saturday, I may go out on Sunday. And so there are studies. We've done a lot of marinas, Breezy Lee, Mill Creek, Harbor Cove, all of them we've designed, and that standard used to be 0.66, which is 10% higher. State has brought it down to 0.6. We feel that's a reasonable number for a generic boat slip, and that's what we used. But if you look at the boats on the opposite side of the harbor, the 40, 50, 60 footers, when they're going out, they're going to have 6, 7 people. There's going to be more cars. Where on these boat slips, which are smaller, the 15 footers, the Wave Runner, you can only fit 2 people at the most on one of them. So we believe that the number of cars per boat slip would be 1, 2 at the most.
Well, Brian, but to go more to the heart of it, Mr. Ledwin, the city's standard is 0.6 parking spaces per boat slip. That's been included in the calculation. So there's no parking variance here.
Correct.
Actually, 0.5.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 0.5. You're right. So
The DEP standard's higher than our city standard.
Got it. So we've complied with that. So this site is required to have, by strict mathematics, 24 and a half parking spaces. That gets rounded down to 24 typically under the residential site improvement standards. 28 spaces are provided. So there are 4 more parking spaces on site than what's required. And to the 12 spaces that are open to the public, 6 would be required under the zoning ordinance, and we have, I think we just said 7. So there's more parking than what's required.
Well, that may be the regulations, but I will tell you, I know because I go down to the auxiliary house down there, and there's parking all over that street. And I believe that if you have a 16 or 17 foot or 20 foot boat, you're probably going to have at least 6 people. You could have 6 people on that.
You could, and if those regulations need to be revised.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean.
My concern is you're going to be parking on that street.
I don't disagree with you, but I will qualify that as you go down Yacht Avenue, you recognize that many of the structures that are there have no parking whatsoever.
I understand
Yeah,
that.
so-
But you're at the mouth of the street, and you've got a lot of cars that are traversing and trucks that are traversing that street. And you may say, I understand, there's a criteria, 0.6 or whatever it is. But I will bet you that if you have those many slips available to the public, there will be cars parked on that street, which will inhibit the traversing of that street by the residents down the end of that street.
Well, what's the solution to that? I mean, they're not seeking a parking variance.
I understand that, and I'm just looking
So
for,
that's actually a reason to grant the one variance they're seeking, which is for backout parking, because they're actually putting it there where it's kind of difficult to put it there. So I'm just giving a heads up that they're not really looking for a variance for the number of parking spaces. And it's a fair statement to say that if you disagree with the 0.5 or the 0.6, that's something that we can deal in a planning review, or in a master plan review, or in a zoning amendment. But our standard, as we are to follow the standards, we don't make them, the city makes them, the city council makes them, is 0.5 for us. DEP is 0.6, so ours is even more lenient. They would only need half of 12, which would be 6, so they actually have one more than we would require. So I'm just, just giving a heads up that it's a valid point that maybe that number doesn't always work because people bring more than one car for the boat slip and stuff, but that's not in our regulations. Our regulations are 0.5, okay? So there's nothing to really, I'm just explaining that. What you do with it is up to you. I'm just explaining that to you, we're required as a board to follow the rules that are set by the town, not even by the DEP really, by the town, and that is that they've exceeded that, both as to the boats and as to the site overall. They're 20%, almost 20% higher in terms of parking than would be required. Because they have 24 is required, right?
Correct.
So I'm just on the parking issue. The parking thing that I think as a board would be the proper focus is the back out issue, as to whether or not you think the benefit of having those spaces for those slips outweighs the risk of the backing out, given that most of Yacht Avenue is back out parking anyway, and it's, I fear the testimony was there's a 10-mile post, and I think it's technically 25, or there's talk of making it 15. I think that's what's, isn't that?
Can't go that fast
20.
anyway.
Yeah, but it's a unique area for backup parking. The backup parking that we've encountered in the past, although it usually happens on the planning board more than the zoning board, was on, help me out, Craig, Philadelphia Avenue, Beach Avenue, Iona, which actually got it.
Icona.
Icona.
The Icona was denied.
No, it's Icona, but the one that was in my mind was Locale. Backup parking. And they were across sidewalks in a entertainment district, so that's their different analysis, I think.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on one item. We submitted the traffic study by Shropshire Associates, which in its first paragraph indicates 10-mile-an-hour posted speed limit.
Okay, I understand there's a sign that says that. I didn't know that actually was the speed.
Traffic analysis indicates it's a 10-mile-an-hour posted speed limit.
I understand there's a sign that says that, but is it really the speed limit?
Parking all over the street.
I would have to, you'd have to go to the city ordinance where they're,
All right, that's fine. Well, that's what it is. It's a slow area. Should be, at least. You good?
I had the same question, Mr. Levenheim, about the parking.
Yeah.
Because I know what happens, and it's going to be the same way. They'll bring more than one car for the slips, and they'll be parking, if they're not on the Yacht Avenue, they're going to be down on Massachusetts Avenue, where they are now, for other boat slips. And you'll see the boat trailers and things down there, and that neighborhood, it's going to be overflowed again. I mean, it's just going to be the traffic. We just don't have enough parking.
Is there?
Well, I want to address that. You will not see trailers to or from this site. Remember, one of the things that was testified to is that boats will not launch or be serviced here. This is a marina by definition because there are boat slips. But this is not a place where people will be bringing their trailers. Absolutely not. It's not designed for it. At 4 spaces more than what was required, we presented a surplus to you. And I respectfully agree with Mr. King's comments. We could adding more and creating more numbers would unfortunately be just pulling numbers out of the sky. I'm going to rely, and we've relied on the code, and we've outperformed it with this design.
There were 20%.
Mr. Catanese, you keep saying that you have 4 more spaces than what's required. Can you take a look at my parking calculation on page 5, just so the record is corrected?
I do apologize, Dan. I was working off of the site plan.
Okay, so, and this is a blend of our parking requirements in our code, as well as the residential site improvement standards. So there's 7 4-bedroom townhouses. Is that correct? Okay, so that the RSIS requirement for 4-bedroom townhouses is 2.4 spaces per unit, which equals 16.8 spaces. There is a 2-bedroom, single-family dwelling that's being preserved on site, which requires 1.5 spaces, correct?
Brian?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you have 20 slips at 0.5 spaces per slip as per our ordinance, which
So you-
requires 10 spaces.
We calculated, did you calculate the accessory slips separately, Brian?
We did.
Got
We
it.
did.
So that's the discrepancy in the numbers, because they were accessory. Because 8 are going to be accessory to the residential units, Brian didn't run the calculations on that. So it complies either way, but if we don't create a parking load for the 8 that are associated with the houses,
So let's talk about that. Is there any restriction preventing a owner of Unit 1 from renting out his slip to someone else? And if you're going to make that calculation, there needs to be, if you're going to accept that calculation out.
we-
So by strict reading, I think you need half a space per slip.
and we comply then.
Okay, and
by
you do,
that.
you do comply, and my table indicates there's 28 required and there's 28 proposed. The one thing I didn't do is the EV, Mr. Murphy testified that they are compliant with the electric vehicle parking standards. It's brand new. Just came online with the state. The city has adopted their ordinance consistent with the state requirements. They give you a 2-for-1 credit whenever you provide one of those. So theoretically, there's 28 physical spaces, but they get credit for an extra one, so there's 29 spaces by strict calculation.
So it's fair to say they meet or exceed
Yes.
your calculation?
Yes. Okay. So I just want to make sure the record was clear, and
Do you park in one of those spaces, or is your house, your lovely house?
No, ma'am, I have a unit in the Island Creek. I'm in the condos that are adjacent to the property. I've been there for 30 years.
Okay, what about the little white house, the one that you,
I think he utilizes a parking space there.
what is it, one of those calculated ones, or?
Yes,
It is. Mr. Hurl's allowed for 1.5 spaces for that one.
Is it one of these spaces that's? I mean,
Yes,
I've seen the.
in the internal.
vehicle sitting there, that's, right. It's just right behind the house, it's not really.
got it. Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the question. In other words, the proposed
Does it-
parking?
I guess what I'm saying is, the required parking, is there already a space or something for that white house?
Well, the site's going to get changed with the drive aisles and such, so the existing parking configuration probably isn't relevant to what we're doing now. I think the plan will dictate, and that site was or that one unit was factored in. That's just a little 2-bedroom, I think, 1 or 1.5 bath unit.
Beautiful, the way it's been redone. but
It is.
just
Yeah,
curious.
yeah. So the parking's provided for it.
Craig, will you go over that again for me, please?
The
28 are required,
So
they've
there's
got 28,
There are 28 spaces required,
right?
and that's a blend of the residential site improvement standards and our code. So our code controls the marina use in
Right.
regards to slips, and the residential site improvement standards addresses the types of dwellings and how many bedrooms are in each one. Okay, so that calculation comes out to 28 and change, and the residential site improvement standard says whenever there's a fraction, you round down. Okay? So that's where the 28 came from. They're proposed 28 physical parking spaces.
Right.
Okay? one of which is an electric vehicle space, which under the new regulations counts as a 2-for-1. So you provide one space, it counts as 2. Okay, so theoretically, there's required to have 28. By strict reading of all the regulations, they have a count of 29.
That analysis, by the way, presupposes that none of the unit owners have a slip themselves, and every one of them rents it out.
Right.
Which is not going to be reality. Most, if not all, the unit owners will have a slip themselves, thereby leaving surplus parking spaces that Mr. Murphy's testimony was presenting. Hence the-
And that surplus then can be used by those people who are renting out the slips.
Correct.
So
Renting the 12.
So what I'm saying is, on the top of your drawing, parking spaces 1 through 7, because each unit has two parking places, correct?
One inside,
Yeah.
one outside, and then the third one would be in that parking area that you're pointing.
3.
Okay, so each one has 3. So those aren't available to the slip renters.
No, maybe I'm not, clearly wasn't. There's 2 for each dwelling. And then there's the additional ones that are up in that corner that are shared by everybody. So if I'm having a party, I have guests over, that my guests would have a place to be there. Tomorrow night, you're having a party, and your guests would be there.
I understand.
So we all
But-
can kind of share that.
but
Those
the-
aren't assigned.
They're not assigned to
They're not
anybody.
assigned.
That's the
So the slip owners could technically use those.
That's correct.
So where I'm going is the slips, or the parking places on Yacht Avenue are not the only available parking places for those who rent slips.
True.
Yes, it's conceivable that they could use the 7 surplus spaces.
Yeah, 1 through 7,
They're flex spaces, correct?
they
You have
could,
guests
they could use
or-
that.
Yes, candidly, I had, because our parking was compliant, I hadn't gotten to that level of thought as to assigning the spaces.
Well, my concern is, sir, is
Yes.
that they're going to be parking in the street, and you're going to have a problem on that street, public safety problem.
Well, if the solution to that is making sure that we do not designate or reserve those, those spaces on the the western, I guess, side of the property, perhaps I hope that alleviates your concern, sir.
It would.
Okay.
Because I understand the regulations, but I also have a very strong feeling about what will happen when you have a 15 or a 20-foot boat in a slip.
How many are up there that are flex spaces, so I can write this down? 7.
You know, there's 7, Rich.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Okay, Craig.
You guys are done with your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I might not have seen it, but what is the parking lot? What material is?
Asphalt. Well, primarily.
That's
There's going to be a paver type design and the entrance to make it look more attractive. And then-
Yeah.
Mike, thank you.
So long ago. Yeah, there's going to be an attractive feature in the front, like a paver type finish, and then the remainder will be asphalt. And then the same thing here, where I think these are, if I'm not mistaken, it may even be concrete, but they're a hard surface, not going to be
So you
it's
are-
stones.
You are covering pervious material with impervious material then?
Yes and no. We had to talk to the DEP, and as far as impervious, they say that the shells that are there today are impervious. I respectfully disagree. But what we have done, what you're saying is a concern specifically for stormwater, and so this is piped directly to tidally flowed water. So the only time that this will cause any flooding is when the tide is already up, and there's nothing we can do about that. If the tide's up and it's flooded, it'll be flooded down this area. We brought everything else up for that. But as I stated earlier, all the stormwater goes to the tidally flowed water, and we had to meet with the DEP, their coverage calculations. We went back and forth an immense amount of times with them to work all this out.
Brian, and because this has been engineered per DEP standards to be self-sustaining, it's not going to discharge any water into the city system, that impervious coverage, number one, besides being compliant, is not going to have any negative impact on the neighbors, correct?
Correct. If theoretically, if this is built, it'll be a benefit to the stormwater system in this immediate area. It'll take a little bit of the burden off.
But you can't pour water into a full cup.
True.
Well-
No matter what we do, impervious, pervious, if the tide's up, all bets are off.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
The DEP and their stormwater regulations don't make you address flooding, tidal flooding, because they realize you can't. You're essentially bailing from the ocean.
Right.
And that's why they don't make you do it, so.
Yeah. If, with,
And the difference in the material isn't going to influence that, you feel?
not on tidal, no, and I'm sure Brian and Craig would
Yeah.
agree. When it comes to tidal flooding, that's when the bay is up and you can't tell where the street ends and the bay starts during the big storms. And that's when that corner of Washington Street is flooded and we can't get around it. But that's why the grading of this site, I made a point to ask Brian about that. Grading this site up and then piping it all so that it runs to the bay means that this lot is going to be, number one, better than probably anything around it, and number two, is not going to discharge to anything around it. It's going to take some of the current load that's probably making its way into the system, Brian just testified, and get rid of that and discharge that to the bay. But when the water comes over the bulkhead, everybody's, wading down Yacht Avenue.
And there's another benefit, actually, that I don't think we've really talked about regarding the surfaces. I understand the concept, you're taking something that seems porous, and we're going to make it hard. If you look at the shell that's there, very densely compacted, the amount of water that runs off that is a lot. Very little of it percolates in. Yes, we're taking and putting very hard surfaces in, but we're also adding a lot of soft landscaping, so that all those hard surfaces are going to run off about the same amount as it does today, but we're adding a lot more soft spaces where the groundwater recharge is going to be a lot more in the developed condition than in the current condition.
And that was to Brian's comment. The DEP calls that shell impervious surface.
Interesting.
Yeah, they do, that is not
On the
permeable
post.
per DEP.
That's a hurdle and an understanding that I have a hard time getting the boards to understand, is that it seems pervious, but it's, in stormwater calculation world, it's not. There's not a big difference between that. I think the ratio, the curve ratio for that stone or a clamshell parking is 0.85 versus 0.98 calculation for pavement. So there's not much of a difference.
But don't we allow 50%?
So to encourage that, in our ordinance, we give a credit only for residential dwellings, and we give a 50% credit towards lot coverage if you provide pervious pavers. And that's more, and that, it also lends to the historic nature of the city, because of the historic nature of the driveways and what, the old carriages used to park on, clamshells, stone, pavers, that type of stuff.
But not for the water.
So it's not, it helps a little bit, but it's not a direct relation. It's not 50%.
Any more questions before Craig gives his report?
Okay. So this is a summary of my September 7th, 2022 review memorandum for Yacht Harbor Marine. This is a project located in both the R5 medium high-density residential district, and it has an overlay, which is the harbor overlay. The applicant is seeking the variances that they've mentioned, as well as preliminary and final site plan. This is an application that proposes to construct 7 new residential units in 2 attached dwellings, maintain the 1 single-family dwelling, and convert the existing structure into a bathhouse for marina use and refurbish the 17 marina slip into a 20 slip marina. They didn't talk much about affordable housing, but our affordable housing ordinance kicks in at the once you have 5 units or more, you're required to have a 20% set aside. Any fractional units is a monetary contribution, but you can either provide those units on-site or off-site as per our regulations. In this case, they've indicated that they will propose and comply with that affordable housing requirement with an off-site unit at a site that has not been determined yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, with regards to the completeness review for preliminary site plan approval, these are all three subsection D. They requested a waiver from providing reference to any existing or proposed deed restrictions or exceptions concerning all or any portion of the parcel. Copy of such covenants, deed restrictions, or exceptions shall be submitted with the application. So, Mr. Murphy mentioned a public access easement. Whenever you have waterfront development, the regulations from the state require public access. In this case, they're providing an easement along the waterfront that allows the general public to access the waterfront. I prepared the city's public access plan. This is consistent with that, so this is a good thing. It's something that I'm surprised they didn't embellish a little bit more, but they're providing public access to the waterfront through this development. So they're going to be required to provide that easement and whatever that restriction is, or as part of the application. I support the waiver at this point. There's no sense having them prepared if they don't get approval, or if the plan is modified, so we can provide that as a condition of approval. There was also discussion about the sidewalk. Some of the sidewalk is internal to the site. So if they're going to allow public access along the sidewalks that are being provided, they're going to have to give us a sidewalk easement that's acceptable to the city for those sidewalk portions that fall within their property. So I would also, that language is not under that subsection, but that should be a condition of approval also.
No objection.
Okay, subsection V requires a comprehensive environmental impact statement. When they submit CAFRA compliance statements or New Jersey DEP permitting, they're required to provide this document that encompasses all, I'm not going to say all, but most of those information. So whenever they do that, we waive the environmental impact requirements that are set forth in the strict language that the city has, and we generally accept a CAFRA policy compliance statement that was provided in the application, so we did support a waiver from providing that full environmental impact statement. Traffic impact report. So in this case, they provided a limited traffic engineering statement that doesn't address all of the issues or all of the requirements of our traffic impact report requirements, but it was, to me, in reviewing it for safety, adequacy of the driveways, the back out parking, all of the information that I needed to review the application was there, so I did support the partial versus the whole complete traffic impact statement. And I think it's important to mention at this point, prior to this application being submitted, I think the applicant did some due diligent work and they cleaned up the right-of-way of Yacht Avenue. Is that correct, Mr. Murphy?
That's, I forgot, I can't believe I forgot that.
Okay, yeah, so the former right-of-way lines of Yacht Avenue encroached into public or private improvements on their site, as well as their improvements encroached out into our right-of-way, and the right-of-way line was reestablished so that that was all cleaned up. The right-of-way lines that are shown on the plan are consistent with that?
That's a true statement, yeah.
Okay.
We made the road, Yacht Avenue, we made the right-of-way in this area fit the actual road. The road and the right-of-way just didn't match up well. So, Mr. Klinger, it ended up being a net loss in area for us, but it worked out. It's the right thing to do.
Exchange.
But that's-
For the yacht avenue, right?
Mm-hmm. We made it all right, yep.
which they were going
Yeah,
to buy.
so it's a benefit to both them and the city to clean that mess up. So the right-of-way has been straightened up. I'm glad they did their due diligence and cleaned that up beforehand. I just thought I would mention that because there was significant work that went into that. Okay, lastly, double AA is the requirement that they have to provide the site plan in digital format, and that should be provided as a condition of approval. Based on this, and I'd like to commend Mr. Murphy, they've been through several iterations of the plan with my review. I'm sure they've been through numerous iterations of the plan with the DEP review, but these are clean plans, and I did support completeness for both preliminary and final site plan approval, if the board is so inclined to grant that.
Thank you.
Okay. So this site is located in both the R5 district and it has a harbor overlay. So the harbor overlay is an overlay district that's set up along all of our waterfronts, Cape May Harbor, Schellingers Creek, Devil's Reach, all of those areas have this overlay. And that overlay is to be reviewed in addition to the underlying base zoning requirements. So you'll see on page 4 of 10, I have the R5 district, which is our base district, that permits residential uses, but doesn't deal with the marina use. Then on page 5, I deal with the harbor overlay standards, which are in addition to the R5 standards. And so I'll just roll right into this and just highlight the variances that are being requested. The use variance. So attached dwellings are not a permitted use in either the R5 district or the harbor overlay district. There are multiple family dwellings that are permitted in the R5 district. However, attached dwellings are not one of those listed. So there's a use variance for that. There's also a use variance from section 525-9, which says you can only have one principal use or structure on the site. So in this case, we have multiple structures, multiple uses. There's a use variance that's necessary from that standard. Okay. The building setback lines for the R5 district, there's a 10-foot requirement, and all of these pertain to Yacht Avenue. 10 foot for the existing dwelling that's being preserved, where 1.2 foot exists. The 10-foot setback for Unit 1, which is the one closest to the corner of the Yacht Avenue leg closest to Wawa, I'll venture a guess to describe it that way, 7.62 feet is proposed. Then the conversion of the bathhouse, which is the accessory structure all the way to the north of the site along Yacht Avenue, that front yard setback requirement for that structure is 10 feet, where 7.6 feet is proposed. The side yard, and this is adjoining to lot 4.02, which is the lot to the west, lot line to the west, closest to Washington Avenue, has a 5-foot setback requirement. 3.49 feet is proposed to the eaves. And Mr. Halberner described that and showed you on the picture what portion of the structure that was. All right, moving on to page 5, the harbor overlay standards. I talked about the use. The marina use is permitted as part of the harbor overlay requirements. Once again, attached dwellings are not permitted. The building setback line for the bathhouse, in this case, is 20-foot requirement, which is more stringent than the R5 district, and that is 7.65 that I just previously discussed, and that is for that bathhouse conversion. The bathhouse has a side yard lot line variance that's necessary. 8 foot is required, where 1.2 feet exists and 1.2 feet is proposed. The parking setbacks for Yacht Avenue have to comply with the underlying zoning district setbacks. So there has to be a 10-foot setback along Yacht Avenue, and in this case, the back-out parking along Yacht Avenue is proposed at 5-foot setback. The side yard setback for the parking is required to be 5 feet. I believe it's the 7 flex parking spaces that we were talking about internally off the little cul-de-sac that provides access to the attached dwellings, has a setback of 3 feet where 5 feet is required. Okay. I think that highlights all of those. There's a couple that weren't in the table. Item number 8 under variances, the connection to the city's stormwater drainage system. That's a requirement in our zoning code. It's obsolescent. There's a recommendation in the master plan that says get rid of that. The new stormwater regs do not encourage that type of connection, so therefore we supported the variance from that section. Under item number 9 is parking, extended curb cut. So this section of our ordinance says you're allowed a curb cut to provide entrance into a driveway, and then you're supposed to provide the parking interior to the site. In this case, there's no room to do that. So they've come up with this idea of doing the back out parking at the location along Yacht Avenue. Now, that is something, in general, you guys don't see a lot of site plans, but in general, when it goes to the planning board, it's something that we don't usually grant unless there's a special circumstance. And I encourage the applicant, I'm like, you better demonstrate that this is a special circumstance. Here we have a very low speed limit. The location is not in an area where there's a lot of pedestrians that are traveling here. We can talk about numerous hotels along Beach Avenue where people are backing up and they're bumping into either bicycle traffic or pedestrians. In this case, I think that exposure is very limited. There's not a lot of pedestrian traffic along here, and they're providing sidewalks to get around that parking area. So this is in my opinion, it's a special circumstance. The limited traffic statement supports the back out parking. They don't identify any issues. I've been to the site, I visited that location. I think you can provide safe back out parking in that location, and the applicant has provided testimony supporting that. So I didn't think that was a big issue. Okay, all of the other things I've dealt with. So that's a summary of all the variances. I believe there are 11 that are required, and they're highlighted at the bottom of page 5. Okay, design waivers. They're asking for a design waiver, and I don't think they even talked about these, so I'll talk about them because we did support those in our review memo. There's a separation between the curb and the sidewalk. So on most city streets in Cape May, you have the curb, there's a grass strip between that and the sidewalk. So that's set forth in the ordinance. In Yacht Avenue is a special circumstance. It has, the right-of-way varies, but it's most likely plus or minus 33 feet wide. Most right-of-ways in the city are 50 feet or greater. So in this case, we have a very narrow right-of-way. There's insufficient room to provide that sidewalk in the public right-of-way. So that's why we're asking for those easements so that sidewalk access can be provided for the public on site. So we did support that waiver. There is also a waiver necessary from providing street trees along Yacht Avenue. We all know Yacht Avenue floods. We know it's very narrow, so it's really impractical, and there's no pattern of street trees that are along Yacht Avenue. So in this case, we did support the waiver from that. Okay, so that takes care of the waivers. I'll move on to the general review comments. And the first item is the affordable housing requirements. And they haven't touched much upon it, but they are going to be required to comply with the regulations. So,
And if I could add one thing to that.
I would love to hear some testimony because we really didn't talk about it.
We've submitted a plan that this site will trigger a requirement for 1.4 spaces. I'm sorry, 1.4 units. We were talking about parking so long. So the 0.4 gets satisfied with a payment in lieu, and the one space can get built anywhere in town. We've already been in touch with the city, and we'll work with them to identify, locate, and restrict a unit elsewhere in town to satisfy that requirement. What I think is important in the consideration of the board is that when a set-aside is required, there is a density bonus that is available to the owner of 0.4%, which means you could take the permitted density, which you've already heard the testimony here, is below what's permitted. And that was without the density bonus. So Mr. Klinger has had this design without availing himself to that additional density that would be available to him under the affordable housing regulations. So in terms of true intensity of use and number of units, the numbers we gave didn't even contemplate what else is available under the affordable housing density bonuses. It's a very modest proposal, I think, in that respect, and I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, and I'll just circle back, because there was a lot of testimony with regards to density. So, and I didn't touch upon it on page 4. The lot size per dwelling unit has a requirement in that district of, for every one unit, you have to have 2,500 square feet. So in this case, they're providing double what's required. Every unit has approximately 5,000 square feet. So, and yes, they are correct. They can take advantage of, if they're doing the affordable housing, there is a density bonus that they can apply. And Mr. Catanese was correct in how he calculated that, and that they're not taking advantage of that, but they could. So, all right, back to, so that was comment 1. So item number 1 should be a condition of approval. They're going to be required to provide one space off-site. It's going to comply with all of the COA regulations within our housing code and the ordinance, as well as meet all of the affordable housing requirements. And they're going to be required to pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund the amount for the 0.4 fractional space. Item 2 is our standard condition that we apply to any applicants within a flood zone, that they have to conform with Chapter 258, the Flood Damage Protection Code for new construction, and have to meet the minimum floor elevations for that. I believe that the floor elevations indicated on the plan do comply, but that should be a condition of approval. I've asked that the plans under item number 3, the street cartway paved with dimensions must be indicated along the project frontages, just to clarify what those widths are. That information should be added to the plan as a condition of approval. Item 4 deals with our requirements for clear sight safety triangles at all intersections. So the intersection I'm talking about for this comment, it really deals with the corner of Yacht Avenue closest to the Wawa driveway. There is a 20 by 20 site triangle that's required there. I'm concerned that the landscaping type and heights have to be revised in that area to ensure that there's clear sight at that intersection. Okay. Mr. Murphy talked about the stormwater system that he's providing. This development is considered major development. So we have a threshold where our standards kick in. This is a major development. So he has provided a grading and drainage plan designed in accordance with the code. It addresses the 2-year design water quality storm. Because this is a site which abuts tidally flowed waters, water quality volumes do not have to be addressed. Mr. Murphy went on to explain the difference, how he's treating the clean water versus the dirty water, which is consistent with the new stormwater regs. He has to comply with those because this is a residential project, and the residential site improvement standards have adopted the new regulations set forth by the state. And so we felt that this design is acceptable, providing all other comments in the report were addressed. With regards to the stormwater system, there's maintenance requirements that have to be addressed. And we didn't talk about forms of ownership, but we usually don't ask that. Is this a homeowners association that's going to be provided?
There won't be a homeowners association. There may be a condo association,
Okay.
which of course would retain responsibility for all common elements, including any stormwater management.
Okay, so you're going to have to be required to submit all of those required documents and address the stormwater maintenance requirements that are set forth in the code.
Very well.
Item number 7. So that this is piggybacks onto that, and it deals with the responsibility for maintenance and how that has to be addressed, so that should also be a condition of approval. Number 8 is just the requirement that they have to submit a landscaping plan, and what that includes. Subject to the applicant addressing the comments in the report, we found that the landscaping was acceptable, and that our main concern was with regards to site triangles. Item 9 should be a condition of approval, and that says that all lighting shall be completely shielded from traffic on any public right-of-way and from any residential district. 10 is our standard requirement that sidewalk adjacent to the subject site will be replaced to the satisfaction of the engineer. In this case, they're providing all new stuff, so we're not replacing any old stuff that's damaged. Okay, as a condition of approval, the applicant should submit plans to the Superintendent of Streets and Roads for review and comply with any requirements for improvements within the city right-of-way. Item 12 should be a condition of approval, and that requires that city sewer and water department approval is required. Item 13 is the requirement to provide inspection escrow as required by the code, as well as tying the issuance of a certificate of occupancy to the acceptance of those improvements. 14 is compliance with the requirements of the Cape May Shade Tree Commission, and they did provide a report dated 8/16/22 in which they approved, and there was no comments. 15 is compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals, and I'll talk about the other ones that we said. We received a review from the Cape May City Public Works Department, and they approved, and they wrote in there to extend the curb cut, so they had no issues with that extended curb cut. And the fire department approved with the following conditions: no parking signs to be placed in the access drive to ensure adequate emergency vehicle access. Do you have any issue with that?
No objection.
Okay, so that should be a condition of
What's
approval.
the date of that letter?
That is the fire department letter dated 8/4/2022.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 16, they identify that they got conceptual approval from the HPC on May 16th, 2022, so we will need evidence of final approval. Item 17 is compliance with all applicable affordable housing requirements at the time of approval or issuance of building permits as applicable. I'm going to have to change the language of that because I think those are now tied to the certificate of occupancy, so regardless, they're going to be required to comply. 18 is for informational. 19, it just details if the board grants approval, the applicant is required to revise the plans to address all conditions of approval and submit 6 sets of compliant plans to the board engineer for review. So that is a summary of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that there's discussion with regards to density and parking. Once again, they've met the parking requirements of the residential site improvement standards combined with our code requirements for the slip, half a parking space per boat slip. And they have complied with the electric vehicle requirements now that are in effect. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions for Craig? No? Okay, at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Anybody within 200 feet that would like to speak, come up to the microphone. Could you make sure that the microphone's turned on?
Please state and spell your name and give your address for me.
Richard Hollowell, Hollawell, 1512 Yacht Avenue. So I'm directly across the street from the site.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, stuff you got?
I do. As I was just saying, I live directly across the street from the site. My driveway is actually across the street from the White House, one of my driveways. I have a few driveways. As it was stated, Yacht Avenue is very narrow, dangerously narrow, as it is now. And my concern is I think the project is a nice project. I have no problem with that. It's the parking. That is very concerning because this goes right to where Yacht Avenue bends in a 45-degree angle as well. And you can hardly fit two vehicles down Yacht Avenue as it is now. And that bend there is very concerning. And I know that there were 3 more proposed boat slips from 17 to 20. The way I see it, that's going to bring 6 more cars in the summertime, where we're going to have a problem there. And that's my concern. And I believe that's the concern of other residents on the street is the parking with the back out there. And the other thing is there really is no sight distance down the road because the current white structure is blocking the vision for people that have to see what's coming down around that turn down there by Wawa. And I think that is something that's got to be considered and rectified as somebody that lives on that street and sees how there's almost accidents daily on Yacht Avenue, especially in the summertime. And I can't tell how many spaces are proposed here. I think from the original plan that I saw, there were 7. I don't know if that's increased because the additional 3 slips. So I'm not sure how many parking spaces are lined up over there. But you can see on the architect drawings that there are 2 spots there that are right at that bend. And at the very least, I think that should be cut down and disallowed to where that bend is, because things get really ugly right at that point in the road. Thank you.
My name's Dr. J. DiPadova, 1515 Yacht Avenue.
Sir, I have to write down your name, and I'd like to spell it.
DiPativo, D-E, capital P-A-T-I-V-O. First name Carl, C-A with a C.
And what's your address, sir?
1515 Yacht.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, in looking at this rendition here, we'll start out with across the street from the gas station as you make the right into Yacht Avenue, where Fleming's real estate office is. It always floods on that corner. No matter if it's high tide or just a little abnormal high tide, it's always flooding there. And then I see that they propose a walkway, a concrete walkway on that particular road from there until you make the right-hand turn to go north on Yacht Avenue. Well, did everyone know that Wawa's deliveries can't be made unless they use Yacht Avenue? They pull the tractors and trailers through Wawa parking lot and head west on Yacht Avenue so they can back up and make their deliveries behind Wawa. And that goes on all day. And then as you come down the road, right across the street from the existing building that they have, there used to be a 10-mile marker. It was a 10-mile speed limit. And I called the city and asked them if they could put another one up there. And they did. And the existing one had so much mildew on it that I went out there and hit it with bleach to clean them up. Because people going down Yacht Avenue don't obey that 10-mile-an-hour limit. There should be speed bumps on that road. And there's a lot of kids that play on Yacht Avenue. So as you go down, heading toward the Lobster House on Yacht Avenue, all the boat houses, we have, our parking is out to the curb line, and that's, all the boat houses have access to the parking on that side. The opposite side of the street is no parking, and the city enforces that quite a bit, because construction trucks and pickup trucks park there, and if the residents of the boathouse are parking in their spot, they can't get a fire engine down the street if there's any emergency. And that's another concern. And then the amount of parking that I have for boat slips. Now, everybody knows that if you own a boat slip and you invite your friend down, he's going to bring his car. So each individual boat slip should have 2 parking spots at least, because what are they going to do when their friend comes down? Where's he going to park? Can't park on Yacht Avenue because there's no parking on one side, and the boathouses own out to the curb line on the other side. And the street is a very narrow street, and there's kids that play on the street. So that's all my concern, that, you know, they don't have adequate parking.
My name is Joe Ross, ROSS. My seasonal address is 1513 Yacht Avenue. My primary address is 63 Holding Road, Bridgeton.
So you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I'm a registered architect, and the applicant, Bill Klinger, is a former client of mine. I was engaged by Mr. Klinger to provide early site planning services and to develop conceptual building plans. I am speaking tonight, however, as a private citizen and am not being compensated in any way for my comments. I've worn non-professional attire just so you can make the difference. I first want to say that this property has been an eyesore for almost the entire 24 years I have maintained a residence on Yacht Avenue. I believe strongly that the 7 residential condominium units designed by John Halbrunner are both attractive and appropriate for the zoning district and marina area. The plans, forgive me, I have notes I'm reading just so I keep my thoughts organized. The plans maintain the existing historic structure at 1505 Yacht Avenue, renovated in 2018, which I think is admirable, considering the city itself has redesignated it as a non-contributing structure. Kind of baffles me. The plans provide public parking spaces on Yacht Avenue, including 1 handicap spot. Our house guests and myself now have to park on Massachusetts Avenue, as only 2 wheels of our 1 vehicle can park in front of our home on our property. Why there's some discussion about peak parking for boats, which the applicant at least has shown me that he's provided what's required, I think we're neglecting the fact that after hours and off-season, which is the bulk of the time, for people like myself, it'll mean a 100-yard walk instead of a quarter-mile or a half-mile walk to find my car. So I find the 7 parking spots on Yacht Avenue a great benefit for folks like me. I do not own one of the large condominiums that has 3 or 4 parking spots out front. The plan include 20 boat slips available to the public. I personally cannot dock my 17-foot Maycraft at my home because of the nature of my lot. For half the day, I'm looking at mud out my glass window and deck. So for me, I find the fact that there's going to be public boat slips down the street from me that I can walk to be a huge asset and something that's not possible to get elsewhere on Yacht Avenue. I'd have to go over to Roseman's to enjoy that. The other half of that is because of the nature of my particular site, I can't dredge the mud out of my site without potentially negatively affecting my neighbors' homes. So it's not like I can just solve this problem internally. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one on the street, but I am on the street, and that has an impact for me. I find the public boat slips to be a great asset. The plans provide public access to the waterfront, not now available. Again, if you walk down Yacht Avenue, like I have for 24 years, for a sunset stroll, the increasing development of the water-bound side of the street, the westerly side of the street along Schellinger's Creek, has developed with very large structures. And what views we had along the street have largely disappeared over the last number of years. And the fact that the view shed is remaining along Yacht Avenue, and I have now access to walk out along that waterfront, I find to be a tremendous asset, because my rear deck is my backyard. So I can't take an evening stroll unless I go all the way over to Roseman's or around to South Jersey Marina. So that's the reality for folks like me. The plans provide sidewalk improvements from one end of the subject property almost to the other, which makes those sunset strolls, as well as walks to Wawa, Dry Dock, Seaview, Lucky Bones, Mayors, and Lobster House, much safer for me and my family and my guests. The plans provide substantial landscaping improvements, which I believe will enhance the site, particularly over time. So in summary, I heartily support this application as somebody intimately familiar with all the positive and negative idiosyncratic issues associated with life on Yacht Avenue. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone beyond 200 feet that would like to speak? Okay, this time I'll close it to the public.
Someone's getting up.
Oh, never mind.
Come up.
Name Frank Antonucci, Antenucci.
What's your address, sir?
1488 Washington Street.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I've been a full-time resident there for 4 years, and to see some kind of development there, I think will be a big improvement for that area, because I do walk to that Wawa, and there is no sidewalks. It's very dangerous. The amount of cars that come from the Wawa, not really from Yacht Avenue, it can be challenging. And I think with a sidewalk, it will make a huge difference. And they see that lot gone with some nice buildings, I think it will be quite an improvement. Since we did such an improvement on our development, I think it would be quite an asset to Cape May City. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Antonucci, right?
Yes.
Just so that it's clear, 1488 Washington, those are the 5 attached units as you make the turn just to the left of Fleming Real Estate. So you're
Yes.
within 200 feet of the subject site and very close to it.
That's right there.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? We'll close it to the public at this time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can ask questions.
Just a question because of what Mr. Ross said. He's across the street and he's looking for parking, so he's renting one of the slips. Does that allow him to be in that parking spot 24 hours a day then?
Candidly, we hadn't thought that through.
That's what, that made me think of that, like, could somebody just park their car there and never?
Well, let me answer your question in the form of a question to Mr. Klinger. Because, Mr. Klinger, you've owned this property for many years, right?
19 years, yeah.
During that time, it's my understanding that during flood events, during the off-season, for some of the residents that you know on site, some of them have used the lot to alleviate the parking load, right?
Most of them, very truthfully. If you know Yacht Avenue, I mean, I've been waist deep in water there, and it's just understood that they park their vehicles on the site, so it's...
What would control it during the high season then?
Well, yeah, the answer is that if it became a problem, of course, that would have to be regulated. And while Mr. Klinger can speak to why the expectation is that it'll generally be available, you know, in 10 or 20 or 30 years, we can't guarantee that that would be available for Mr. Ross. We can only hope that people would continue to be good neighbors. To your concern, there could never be a situation, well, I can't say there can never, but I can't imagine a situation where neighbors begin to occupy that to displace the needed parking for the marina. I think that would come to an end quickly. Because,
Who would
If it
police?
became
well,
a
that's the
problem-
condo association.
If it became a problem, you could put it in the rentals for the boat slips. Like,
Oh,
you can't keep your car there.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just never occurred to me either till he said that.
Yeah, you know, it's not proposed as a public parking lot, but like I said, the history probably explains the expectation of why there's probably going to be a friendly approach, at least for some period of time.
Anything else? Anybody else?
May I close?
Sure.
Thank you. We covered a lot in our presentation. There are a heck of a lot of good reasons to approve this application. The low density compared to what's permitted, the view corridors, and I'm not going to harp on all of them. I do have, in response to some of the questions.
Bring a microphone.
Yep. One of the comments by Mr. DiPativo hooks into what for me, is one of the greater benefits of this project. And it was Mr. Murphy's testimony about what could go there and what isn't. Imagining 3 duplexes here with 6 driveways that all have back-out parking that would create congestion for those trucks from the Wawa that make their way out and the other people that exit the Wawa would be, respectfully, in my non-expert opinion, a terrible result for this site. The testimony was that that would create buildings right there in that corner where now you have open space as a result of the clustering and would still leave additional space for buildings over here before we even talked about the affordable housing residential density bonus. The C2 criteria, which is one of the standards we talked about, asks in its simplest form, is this an opportunity for improved zoning over what's otherwise permitted in the zone? And when I think about 4 duplexes, the same number of units, the same density, but with all those driveways backing out and being configured in other ways that would be fully conforming, but would be much worse for the neighborhood, this really rises above it. I hope you agree, and we appreciate your time.
Mr. Cardenas, that is a nice point. You know, whenever you're looking at a project, you have to consider whether it's a better zoning alternative to what else could go there. I mean, that's part of being a good town planner. So you always want to look for projects that seem to be, perhaps, you know, whether it's maybe imperfect, but it's a better zoning alternative to things that could be permitted over which you would have little or no control. So that's kind of like the fundamental, to me, the fundamental role of a planning or zoning board when you have an application. So that's a good, you know, I guess, lesson for the board, so to speak. Okay, so The application is one for several different types of variances. It includes D variances and, C variances. But they presented this project as a whole. They want the benefits of the project as a whole to be considered. So I think you vote on it as a whole. Just as the sidewalks, they say is a safety benefit, and that's one thing you have to consider when considering back-out parking, quite honestly, because you might not like back-out parking, but the whole other part of the project is fantastic. So you weigh those against the project as a whole. So you're gonna vote in one vote. But when you vote, you need to consider a bunch of different standards, and I want you to give them serious thought. You have the D variance standard. Because it's a D variance, when you vote, it has to have 5 out of 7 to vote yes for this project to be approved. Okay? If they don't get 5 out of 7, the project isn't approved. So we're not gonna vote separately on back-out parking, which would require only 4 of 7, because without this whole project, you wouldn't give back-out parking. It wouldn't make any sense. So you're gonna vote on the project as a whole in a single vote. The standard that you apply for the D variance was outlined by Mr. Hurlis. It's in the report. I incorporate it by reference. But you're looking for special reasons, which is a fancy way of saying the purposes of zoning. And they've given those to you. There is adequate information in the record to me to support that variance if you're inclined to grant it. They're clustering. What they're saying is we could put 4 duplexes spread out around this lot, have a whole bunch of different driveways, and there wouldn't be a variance. There might not even be any variances at all. And you'd have to approve it, be a by right application. But they're saying, look, by putting these closer together, we know that's not a permitted use, but there's purposes of zoning advance. And they went through those: light air and open space, the safety of not having another exit over on the other part of, busier part of Yacht Avenue. And they went through those. I won't repeat them all, but that's the idea that you're going through your mind. You're going through the special reasons, the purposes of zoning. I think you're looking at any negative impact on the zone plan and zoning ordinance and the neighborhood. Impact on the zone plan and zoning ordinance is why they went around and talked about other projects in the area where the density is even greater. And that's part of the analysis of how bad is this hurting the zone plan and zoning ordinance in the neighborhood if there's places that are more dense that clustered or put houses together in the same zone, okay? So that's what they want, stuff that you should be thinking about. For the C1 and C2 variances, those have more to do with the bulk things. Well, the back-out parking as well, but also the eaves. Remember, the eaves are overhangs, the parking near too close to the road, that kind of stuff. I'll call it smaller. It's still significant, it's still important, but it's some of the things that come along when you design a project on an odd-shaped lot. This lot has 2 fronts and water. It's a complex design thing, and I commend their experts. This is a thoughtful design. I think Craig has more experience than me, so you listen to him. I think he would agree that this is a thoughtful design. Whether you approve it or not, your professionals put a lot of thought, and it's a hard design because it involves the DEP, it's on the water, it's a complicated thing to put together. So you need to weigh the benefits. Well, first you need to look at whether there are topography, the shape of the land, whether that is a reason why you have some of these variances. The fact that they're building a retaining wall, right? That, they say that mitigates the parking being too close to the roadway. And that makes some sense, right? Because it's raised and there's a wall, and that's a topography issue. Because they've elevated it to comply with flood, to make it safer. That's because they're near the water. So you see all that ties in. So you gotta weigh all that. You also need to do some balancing under C1. You gotta take all those benefits that they've talked about and weigh that against some of the detriments. So even though you listen to the public and you heard some of their concerns about parking, those can be legitimate, but you're weighing them against other benefits. So it doesn't mean that, you're not rejecting the concerns, you're just weighing them against the good things, okay? And that's what you do as a board. That's in your discretion to do that. So those are all the things I need you to think about, all right? Because that's the standard you're supposed to apply, and then you vote. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right, so sir?
I would, depending on deliberations, I may ask respectfully for consideration of separate votes on the Ds and the Cs. It's within the board's discretion.
Let's see how it goes, and then I will talk about that, because I don't believe in that, unless it's very specific. So if you lose the D variance, the project, to me, I don't know how we could apply the weighing and all the other things for the C when we don't have the clustering that was supposed to be such a great thing. So we'll have to talk about that, okay? Because if we grant a variance for back-out parking, for what project? If we grant a variance for an eve, for what project? Because now we're not clustering and building attached dwellings. So it's very hard to do that. I've done it. I did it on Icona for the pool and the back-out parking. They wanted a pool, they wanted backup parking. I knew the backup parking was in trouble, so we voted on the pool separately. They ended up building the pool, but didn't get the backup parking. So I've separated when there's a clear benefit to doing it, but I have trouble perceiving that in this case, but if you lose, we'll discuss it, okay? All right, so the motion I recommend being made is for preliminary and final site plan approval with the associated variances as listed 1 through 11 on page 5 of the engineering report, subject to the waivers and conditions as outlined by the board engineer in his report and in his testimony. There was one amendment. He added, also need a sidewalk easement on number 3, but mostly the conditions are as stated in the engineering report. That's the motion that I recommend being made in the affirmative. So that means if you vote yes, you approve it. If you vote no, you don't approve it. But how you vote is up to you, but we always make the motion to approve and then vote from there, okay? Does anybody have any questions? All right, so that's the motion I recommend being made, and how you vote is up to you, so.
Somebody make the motion?
Okay. I will make the motion as articulated by our counsel.
Seconded.
Mr. Murray motions, Mrs. Werner seconds, Mrs. Notch,
Yes.
Mr. Ledwin,
No.
Ms. Hessel,
This is very difficult for me, I think, because of the human element in it. But I'm going to vote. It's really hard. I'll vote yes.
Mrs. Werner.
I'm voting yes, and I will admit that I came in prejudiced in my mind against the project. But all the testimony convinced me to say yes.
Mr. Venuto.
Yeah, I find this project to be a huge asset to the city of Cape May, so I'm voting yes.
Mr. Murray.
I'm going to vote yes as well. I looked at the design. I think the design was very, very well done. I agree with what Mr. Ross said as part of the public comment. And I think that the applicant has met their burden, and I will vote yes.
Mrs. Hutchinson.
I'm going to vote yes for all the reasons that everybody said, but I do think that it's taken 19 years to figure this out, and working with the DEP has been hard. I think every time I go on that street, I mean, I love to go down there like everybody else and look at it, and it's that parking and speed limit. I don't know how anybody can go faster than 10 miles an hour. When I was down there today, there was a construction truck on this side, and there was no way anybody could go down there. But anyway, I think you've done a great job. You've designed it well. Thank you. And I think it's going to be an asset. Congratulations.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you for your patience on a long application, long presentation. Congratulations.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Motion
All
to
in
adjourn?
favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone.
No offense taken.
You know the right way to say it.